The morning sun burned across the runway of a private airfield outside Los Angeles, the heat rippling above the asphalt and glinting off the wing of a massive silver jet. It was sleek and expensive, the kind of aircraft that could fly across continents without stopping. Owned by one of the richest men in the country, David Langford. The jet was supposed to take off at sunrise, but instead it sat idle, surrounded by frustrated engineers and exhausted mechanics. Every few minutes, someone tried a new diagnostic tool, another computer scan, another wire adjustment. Each time, the engine sputtered, clicked, and went silent. David stood nearby with his arms crossed, his expression a mix of impatience and disbelief. He was a man used to control, used to solutions that appeared the moment he demanded them. His suit jacket hung loosely over his shoulders despite the heat, his tie loosened but still in place. He had already made 3 phone calls to his assistant, 4 to his pilots, and 1 to the jet manufacturer, all with the same result. No one had an answer. A short man in a mechanic's uniform approached him, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Sir, we've checked the turbine system twice. It's not the electronics. It's something in the compression unit, but we can't isolate it." David's jaw tightened. "You can't isolate it?" he repeated, his voice edged with disbelief. "You mean to tell me I have 20 engineers here, and not one of you can tell me why my $80 million jet won't start?" The mechanic looked at the ground, mumbling, "We're doing our best, sir." "Your best isn't good enough," David said coldly. He turned away, pacing toward the shade of a nearby hangar. The group of workers kept their heads down, moving slowly, murmuring to each other as they double-checked the same systems again. Outside the hangar fence, on the other side of the runway, a small crowd had gathered. It wasn't every day you saw a billionaire's jet grounded, surrounded by luxury SUVs and men in suits barking into radios. Among the onlookers sat a young girl on the edge of the sidewalk, her back against a concrete barrier, her clothes worn and dust-stained, her shoes 2 sizes too big. She looked about 16 or 17, her hair tied back under a faded cap. Beside her sat a small backpack, a battered notebook peeking out from its side pocket. Her name was Jasmine Carter. She had been living in a shelter a few miles away and spent her mornings walking past the airfield on her way to a nearby diner where she sometimes helped clean tables for breakfast leftovers. Today, though, she had stopped when she saw the commotion. She had always loved machines, anything that moved and hummed and sparked. Her late father had been an aircraft technician before losing his job years earlier. He used to bring home old manuals and broken parts, teaching her how every system fit together like a living organism. From where she sat, she could see the engineers climbing in and out of the open engine bay, their expressions growing more frustrated. Something about the way they handled the components looked wrong to her. They were checking the diagnostics, but no one seemed to be listening to the rhythm of the system, to the sound that told her everything she needed to know. She tilted her head slightly, closing her eyes for a moment, hearing the faint metallic click that repeated every time they tried to start the turbine. It was offbeat, too sharp, like something misaligned deep inside. A gust of hot air swept across the tarmac as one of the engineers slammed a tool case shut. "We need a specialist," someone shouted. David turned sharply. "I've had 3 flown in. What else do you need? A miracle?" The workers exchanged weary glances, none daring to answer. Jasmine stood slowly, dusting off her jeans. She didn't know why she did it, but something in her chest told her she had to at least speak. She slipped through the side gate, while one of the guards was distracted, walking toward the commotion with hesitant steps. The moment she reached the perimeter of the work area, a security guard spotted her. "Hey, you can't be here," he barked. She froze, but her voice came out steady. "I think I know what's wrong with the jet." Everyone turned. David glanced over his shoulder, his eyes narrowing when he saw her, thin, dusty, clearly not part of his crew. "Excuse me," he said. "Did I just hear that right?" The guard moved to escort her out, but Jasmine raised her hand slightly. "I just want to help." "I think I know what the problem is." David let out a short, incredulous laugh. "You? You think you can fix a multi-engine luxury jet that a team of certified engineers can't figure out?" Jasmine met his gaze, her expression calm. "I can try." The silence that followed drew the attention of everyone nearby. A few of the mechanics exchanged smirks, some shaking their heads. One whispered, "This ought to be good." David crossed his arms. You've got 10 seconds to explain how you'd fix something you don't even understand. I do understand, Jasmine said quietly. I heard the engine when they tried to start it. The compression valve in the secondary intake is misaligned. It's drawing air unevenly. That's why it's shorting the sensors. The chief engineer frowned. That's impossible. We already checked the valves. Did you check the secondary unit inside the left housing? She asked. It's usually the last place people look because it requires pulling the stabilizer off. There was another pause, this one heavier. The engineers glanced at each other. One muttered, "That could explain the misfire reading." David turned slowly toward his lead technician. Is she right? The man hesitated. If the alignment's off in that area, it could cause exactly what we're seeing. But David cut him off. Then check it. The team scrambled back to work. Within minutes, 2 mechanics had removed the panel Jasmine mentioned. They stared at the exposed assembly, and then one of them said quietly, "She's right. It's off by maybe an inch." The sound of tightening bolts and quick commands filled the air. 10 minutes later, the lead mechanic gave a signal to the pilot to test the ignition again. The crowd stepped back. The turbine whirred once, twice, and then the deep, smooth roar of the engine filled the runway steady and perfect. Cheers erupted from the crew. The sound was unmistakable. The jet was alive again. David stood still, his mouth slightly open. The girl who had been standing quietly a few feet away now just nodded and said, "It should hold fine now." He turned to her, words failing him for the first time in years. How could you possibly know that?" She shrugged lightly. "I learned from my dad. He used to fix engines. They all sound a little different when something's wrong." For a moment, no one spoke. The man who had laughed earlier looked down, embarrassed. David reached into his pocket, pulling out a roll of bills, but Jasmine shook her head before he could speak. "I don't need money," she said softly. "I just needed someone to listen." She turned to leave, but something in David stopped her. For the first time, he didn't see a homeless girl. He saw someone with more instinct, more insight than any of the experts he'd hired. "Wait," he said, his tone quieter. "What's your name?" She looked back. "Jasmine," he nodded slowly. "You've got somewhere to be, Jasmine." "Nowhere important," she said with a small, tired smile. David glanced at his jet, then back at her. "Then maybe you can stay a while." "I'd like to talk." The sun had climbed higher over the airfield by the time David gestured for Jasmine to follow him into the shade of the hangar. The workers were still buzzing from the surprise, some pretending to be busy while sneaking glances at her. She could feel their eyes on her as she walked, her heart pounding but her steps steady. David moved with his usual confidence, but something in his manner had softened. When they reached the quiet corner near a row of grounded aircraft, he turned to face her. "You said your father worked with engines," he began. "Where?" Jasmine hesitated, glancing at the ground. "He used to work for an aviation service company near San Diego. He lost his job when the company shut down. We moved here after that, and now you're—" David trailed off, not quite knowing how to finish the sentence. "Homeless," she said quietly, helping him out. "Yeah. We've been on and off the streets since I was 13. He passed last year. I've been on my own since then." The words hung between them like heavy air. David had met thousands of people in his career, but very few who spoke about their lives so plainly. There was no bitterness in her tone, no attempt to earn pity. Just truth. He cleared his throat, unsure how to respond. "I seem to know a lot about engines for someone without formal training. My dad taught me," she said, her gaze distant. "We used to fix old motorbikes behind a shelter when I was little. He'd say engines are like people. They tell you when something's wrong, but you have to listen carefully. Most people don't." David nodded slowly, her words sticking with him. "That's the second time you've said that. Listening carefully." "Because it's true," Jasmine replied. "Most people rush to fix things before they understand what's actually broken." He looked at her then, really looked. Her clothes were faded, her shoes scuffed, but her eyes were clear, steady, intelligent, focused. There was something about her that reminded him of the engineers he used to hire in the early days of his first company, back when people built things with heart instead of spreadsheets. "You ever think about doing this for real?" he asked. "Becoming a mechanic, I mean." She gave a small shrug. "All the time. But I don't have the papers or the money. I tried applying for training programs, But they ask for addresses and tuition I don't have. David nodded slowly. I see. He stood in silence for a moment, thinking. Around them, the noise of the airfield continued. A jet taking off in the distance, the hum of machinery, the chatter of voices. But inside that moment, it felt quiet. He took a deep breath. You know what, Jasmine? Come with me tomorrow. My company has an aviation division that runs maintenance facilities. I'd like to show you around. Her eyes widened, uncertainty flickering across her face. Why? Because talent like yours shouldn't be sleeping on sidewalks, he said simply. You've got an ear for things most people would never hear. She looked skeptical. You don't even know me. I know what I saw today, he replied. And I trust that more than any resume. She hesitated, torn between disbelief and hope. You really mean it? I do, he said. If you show up tomorrow morning at this hangar, I'll take you there myself. She nodded, though part of her didn't dare to believe it. All right. I'll be here. Good, David said, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. This has my assistant's number on it. If anyone gives you trouble, call her. Jasmine held the card like it was something fragile, something she wasn't used to being trusted with. She tucked it into her pocket carefully. Thank you, she said quietly. As David walked away, his pilot came up beside him. You sure about that, sir? The man asked. You don't even know who she is. David looked back at the girl still standing near the hangar. No, he said softly, but I know what she did. That's enough for now. That night, Jasmine found a spot behind an abandoned diner to rest. She pulled her backpack close, the business card still tucked safely inside her jacket. She kept thinking about the sound of that engine roaring to life, about the disbelief in everyone's faces, about the way David had looked at her, not with pity but respect. It had been a long time since anyone had looked at her that way. The next morning she woke before sunrise. The sky was pale blue, the air cool and still. She washed her face at a gas station sink, tied her hair back neatly, and walked the long road to the airfield. Every step felt heavier with worry. What if he'd changed his mind? What if it had all been a polite gesture? But when she arrived, she saw him standing by a black car near the hangar talking on his phone. When he spotted her, he ended the call and smiled slightly. You came, he said. You said you'd take me, she replied. He nodded and opened the passenger door. Then let's get going. The drive to the maintenance facility was quiet at first. David asked her a few questions about her experience, and she answered honestly. She had no certifications, no schooling, just the lessons her father had taught her, and the endless nights of tinkering with scrap engines. When they arrived, the facility stretched wide across the tarmac, filled with aircraft in various stages of repair. Engineers in uniform moved briskly between stations. As they stepped inside, a supervisor hurried over, startled to see David there. Mr. Langford, we weren't expecting you today. I know, David said, glancing around. I brought someone I want you to meet. This is Jasmine Carter. She's going to observe today. The supervisor looked confused but didn't argue. Of course, sir. We'll make arrangements. For hours, Jasmine walked through the facility, taking everything in. The smell of oil and ozone, the sound of tools clinking against metal, the hum of compressors. She asked quiet questions, listened intently, and occasionally pointed out things even some of the technicians missed. By the end of the day, the supervisor pulled David aside. She's sharp, he said quietly. She caught a calibration error that's been costing us hours of work each week. We were about to replace a sensor we didn't need to. David smiled slightly. I'm not surprised. When the workday ended, he walked Jasmine to the car. How was it? He asked. It felt like home, she said softly. He nodded. Good. You start tomorrow, officially. Her eyes widened. You mean it? I do, he said. We'll get you training, housing, and whatever you need to get started. She looked down, her throat tightening. I don't know how to thank you. You already did, he said. You reminded me what real talent looks like. As they drove away, the setting sun cast long shadows across the runway. Jasmine stared out the window, her reflection faint against the glass. For the first time in years, she felt something she hadn't dared to feel, security, maybe even hope. And somewhere inside her, she could almost hear her father's voice again saying, always listen. Machines don't lie. The weeks that followed changed Jasmine's life in ways she could barely process. She began her apprenticeship at Langford Aviation's maintenance division, arriving early every morning and staying long after the others had gone home. The first few days were overwhelming. The sheer size of the aircraft, the hum of industrial tools, the constant stream of commands echoing through the hangar, but she adapted quickly. The supervisors noticed how she moved differently from most trainees. She didn't rush. She listened, to the engines, to the faint rhythm of power cycling through machines, to the subtle shifts that most people ignored. David visited the hangar often, though not always to be seen. He'd stand near the office windows, watching her work quietly alongside the engineers. She never looked out of place. She didn't try to prove herself. She just focused, her hands sure, her eyes sharp. Something about her reminded him of the people who used to inspire him when he first started in business. The ones who worked not for recognition, but for the satisfaction of doing something right. One afternoon, while Jasmine was cleaning an auxiliary power unit, the head engineer Victor approached her. "You've got good instincts," he said. "Most apprentices would have missed that leak in the compressor valve. Where'd you learn to spot something that small?" Jasmine smiled faintly. "My dad used to say small things cause the biggest problems. I guess I learned to look closer." Victor chuckled. "He taught you well." "He did," she said softly, glancing at the floor. "He just never got the chance to use what he knew the way he wanted to." "Well," Victor said, "looks like you're getting that chance now for both of you." Later that week, David invited Jasmine to his office. She walked in nervously, unsure why she'd been called. His office sat at the top of the corporate tower, the walls lined with framed photos of aircraft, awards, and business deals. It was the kind of space she used to imagine belonged to people who lived in another world entirely. But David stood by the window, his sleeves rolled up, looking less like a billionaire and more like a man lost in thought. "You've been doing good work," he said as she approached. "Victor speaks highly of you." "Thank you," she said quietly. He turned, studying her expression. "How are you settling in?" "It's different," she admitted. "I still wake up early because I'm afraid I'll miss it. That it'll be gone if I don't get there fast enough." David smiled faintly. "It's not going anywhere. You've earned your place here." She nodded, unsure what to say next. He motioned toward a chair and she sat, her hands resting in her lap. "Oh no," he said. "When I started my company, I was surrounded by people who thought success was about money. I believed them for a long time. But lately, I've been thinking that success is really just another word for being useful. What you did on that runway reminded me of that." She met his eyes, surprised by the sincerity in his tone. "I didn't mean to prove anything," she said. "I just wanted to help." "That's exactly why it mattered," he replied. They sat in silence for a moment before he added, "I've been thinking about something. You've got a gift, Jasmine, and I want to help you develop it. I can get you enrolled in a proper training program, engineering, mechanics, whatever you choose. Full scholarship." Her eyes widened. "You'd really do that?" He nodded. "It's the least I can do. I've spent years funding things that didn't mean much. This one does." Her throat tightened. "I don't know what to say." "Say yes," he said gently. She smiled, tears welling despite her effort to hold them back. "Then yes." After she left, David sat back in his chair, the quiet of his office wrapping around him. For the first time in years, he felt that what he was doing had meaning beyond the next contract or headline. Jasmine wasn't just another story to tell. She was proof that brilliance could live anywhere if someone gave it space to grow. Over the next few months, Jasmine began her studies through a special training program partnered with the company. She balanced coursework with hands-on work at the hangar, her confidence growing with each day. She was still quiet, still humble, but she carried herself differently now, with steadiness instead of fear. One evening, as she was finishing her shift, she heard someone calling her name. It was David holding a file in his hand. "Walk with me," he said. They stepped out into the cool evening air, the hangar lights glowing behind them. "How's the studying going?" he asked. "Hard," she said with a small laugh. "But good. I never thought I'd be learning like this. Sometimes it feels unreal." David nodded. "You're earning it. That's what makes it real." They stopped near the edge of the runway. The sound of a departing jet filled the air, its engines fading into the night sky. "Do you ever miss flying?" she asked. "I never learned," he said with a faint smile. "I've owned dozens of planes, but I've always sat in the back. I guess I trusted other people to handle the hard part." She looked at him curiously. "Maybe it's time you learned," she said. He chuckled softly. "Maybe it is." They stood there quietly, watching the distant lights blink across the sky. David glanced at her, noticing how calm she seemed even as the wind whipped across the runway. "You know," he said, "the world is going to change because of people like you." Jasmine shook her head. "I just fix things. That's exactly how it starts," he said. As months passed, news of the young mechanic who once fixed a billionaire's jet began to spread. A journalist who had been at the airfield the day it happened wrote an article about her story, how she had turned a moment of kindness into a life-changing opportunity. But Jasmine avoided interviews. She didn't want the attention. She wanted to keep learning, to stay grounded in what she loved. The next time David visited the hangar, he found her alone, working under a small aircraft wing, humming quietly to herself. "Still fixing everything you touch," he said with a smile. She looked up, grinning. "Still breaking things for me to fix?" He laughed. "Guilty." There was a moment of warmth between them, mutual respect, not of status but of understanding. For both, that day on the runway had been more than a coincidence. It had been a turning point, one that reminded them both of what truly mattered. A year later, the hangar looked completely different. It wasn't just a place for maintenance anymore. It had become a small training center attached to Langford Aviation, where young apprentices from underprivileged backgrounds came to learn the fundamentals of aircraft engineering. The idea had been David's, but the soul of it, the teaching, the culture of patience and humility, belonged entirely to Jasmine. She had gone from a quiet observer to the person everyone sought for guidance. Her hands, once blistered from scavenging scrap engines behind a diner, now moved with precision and confidence, her voice calm as she explained complex systems to students who reminded her of who she used to be. That morning, sunlight streamed through the hangar windows, casting golden light over rows of shiny tools and open panels. Jasmine stood with a small group of trainees, helping them trace the wiring of a test engine. "It's never just the part that fails," she said, pointing gently to a circuit line. "It's the connection. Always start there. Machines break because we forget how they depend on every piece working together." Her words were soft but certain, the kind that stayed with people long after she said them. David watched from a few steps away, leaning against the railing near his office window. He had grown older in the past year, though softer around the edges. His company was thriving, but he no longer measured his success by numbers or market value. Watching Jasmine teach had become a quiet reminder of what true progress looked like. People lifted, not just systems improved. When she finished explaining the wiring, she caught his eye and smiled faintly. After class, he called her over. "You've turned this place into something extraordinary," he said. "I just tried to give people what someone once gave me," she replied. He nodded. "And you did it better," she laughed lightly. "You're being kind." "I'm being honest," he said. "Do you have a minute? I want to show you something." He led her to a smaller hangar adjacent to the main one. Inside stood a small private jet, sleek but modest. The nose of the plane gleamed in the filtered light, and the words "The Carter Project" were painted in simple letters near the cockpit. Jasmine froze, reading the name twice before turning to him. "You named a jet after me?" "Not after you," he said gently. "For you. It's part of a new program I'm launching. The Carter Project will fund education for young engineers who don't have the means to study. Mechanics, aviation techs, inventors, anyone with the spark you had. You'll lead the technical mentorship." Her voice caught. "David, I don't even know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," he said, smiling. "You earned this the moment you said, 'Let me try.'" She walked slowly toward the plane, her fingertips brushing its cool surface. The name shimmered under the sunlight. It wasn't about fame or ownership. It was about belonging, proof that the world could change when someone chose to listen instead of dismiss. She turned back to him, her eyes damp but bright. "You know, he used to tell me that engines don't lie," she said softly. "I think people don't either when you finally listen," David nodded. "Oh, your father would be proud," she smiled. "Maybe. He used to say success isn't about what you have, it's about what keeps running after you're gone." They stood there for a long time, the quiet hum of distant aircraft filling the air. Then Jasmine said, "There's something I've been meaning to tell you." "What's that?" "I want to keep fixing things," she said. "Not just planes, people's chances. I want to take what you've given me and build more places like this. Places where kids like me don't have to wait for someone to notice them. He smiled, a slow, proud smile. Then that's exactly what you'll do. Over the next year, the Carter Project grew into something larger than either of them expected. Students came from across the state, some from shelters, others from broken homes, all with the same fire Jasmine once carried. She taught them not only how to repair machines, but how to believe in what they could become. She was patient with their mistakes and unshaken by their doubt. When one of them grew frustrated with a stubborn part, she would say the same thing her father once told her. Listen, Kaylet's trying to tell you what's wrong. One afternoon during a public demonstration for the new scholarship partners, Jasmine stood beside the very jet she had once repaired. Its engines roared to life as smooth as ever. Reporters asked for quotes, cameras flashed, but her answers stayed humble. It wasn't luck, she said. It was a chance. I just didn't waste it. When the ceremony ended, David joined her by the plane. The air was warm, the sun beginning to set over the tarmac, casting long golden light over the hangar floor. You know, he said quietly, you've done more for this company and this world than most people with all the power in it. She looked at him, her expression calm. Maybe power isn't the point, she said. Maybe it's listening that changes everything. He nodded, knowing she was right. As they stood there, the sound of the engine faded into a deep hum, steady and perfect. The same sound that had once drawn her out of a crowd, that had carried her from the sidewalk to the sky. Jasmine looked at the jet, the reflection of the sunset dancing along its surface. She could still remember the day everyone had laughed when she stepped forward, the disbelief in their faces, the silence when the engine came alive. It wasn't anger that she remembered most. It was the moment after, when all noise stopped and respect filled the space where doubt had been. That silence had changed everything. She closed her eyes, letting the hum settle into her chest, and whispered to herself, "You were right. Dad, machines don't lie." Then she turned back to her students gathering near the hangar, her voice steady and sure as she called them over.